This presentation is to help your understanding of France's business culture and help you to build successful relationships while you're in France. A fun fact about France is that turning a baguette upside down is considered unlucky. This presentation is by Kayla Ward and Chase Brackett. Business etiquette is important because it is a way to build relationships and have everyone feel comfortable. First tip is that you should wear appropriate business attire at all times. This is a sign of respect and to show that you are taking the business seriously. Also, according to Passport to Trade, a project led by Salford Business School, when meeting new people, it is important to do a formal introduction that includes your first and last name. And it is also recommended that you learn a few phrases or words in French and use them as much as possible in your conversations. The effort will be well appreciated. When planning a meeting, make sure it is scheduled approximately 2 weeks in advance. Once at the meeting, you should have prepared business cards that have one side in French and one side in English. This is for those that are not fluent in English. When it comes time to greet your French colleagues, it is essential to know the proper way to address them. In the business setting, make sure to address them as Monsieur or Madame. Never use the pronouns tu, because that is much more informal. Instead, use vous. Also, in the business setting, make sure to greet with a handshake. La bise, a kiss on the cheek, is only appropriate once a closer relationship has formed. Also, make sure to give proper personal space by standing an arm length away from others. There are many social differences between France and the United States. In France, formality is highly regarded, especially in business. As mentioned, make sure to have appropriate business attire and address people using correct pronouns. Another social difference is privacy. In the US, it is very common to ask people about their personal lives and to open up about yourself very quickly. This differs in France. They are centered more around privacy, therefore make sure to keep your questions strictly on the business at hand and not on their personal lives. The Cultural Atlas, a collaborative project between SBF and International Education Services, explains that equality is highly valued. Instead of being judged based on gender or age, it is more heavily based on social standing. Lastly, time is essential. Make sure to be punctual, whether it be to lunchtime or a meeting. Time is considered very valuable and should not be something to take advantage of. The communication and language in France differs obviously greatly from the United States, mainly because of the language barrier as they speak French and we speak English, but also because of the way the people of France communicate with one another. France has a high context form of communication, which means they rely on nonverbal cues and gestures more than they do verbalization. This is the opposite of the US, as we tend to rely more on verbal communication instead of nonverbal cues and gestures. Make sure to maintain good eye contact and know the popular gestures used in France. Some examples include thumbs up and thumbs down, waving, and other arm movements. When communicating, the people of France tend to be very direct and sometimes blunt when getting their point across. It is not that they're trying to be rude, it is just the way of their culture. Make sure to always be
When talking about gender differences in the business world, there are many things to learn. Here listed are some of the main differences we see in France from the other countries around the world. Entry-level positions seems to be equally obtained when talking about men versus women having these jobs. But if we look at which gender is seen in higher positions, it seems to be men more often so than women. Some info I gathered from the class textbook is women generally tend to focus on forming a good relationship with clients and the other people they work with in the workforce. And on the other hand, men focus more on the content that they are creating or working with and the outcomes in the workforce rather than building relationships. When talking about religious differences in France, I want to bring up a few points to talk about. After looking through a number of graphs and surveys, It is well known that Catholicism is the most well known and practiced religion in France. In 1905, France became a secular state, which really influenced the idea of religion tolerance. Religion tolerance really helps someone be able to express their religion without judgment or being punished in the workforce or even anywhere in France. Some ability differences that France and the United States differ in are that France lacks in technology that is readily available to aid the disabled community in the workforce. When a disabled person applies to a job, the employer cannot discriminate that person off of just due to their disability. France often felt unprepared because they do not have the proper accommodations for those with a disability to make them feel included and necessary in the workforce. Here are some recommendations to follow when doing business in France. Number 1, meeting tips. Make sure you respect the hierarchy order. Typically, individuals are seated according to their hierarchy. Make sure to set meeting in advance by about 2 to 3 weeks just to ensure that you are well organized. Number 2, French greetings. France uses greetings very differently from the US. For business partners, handshakes are appropriate. Using the right pronouns and the first names will gain respect in the US for France because it shows respect and appreciation. Number 3, business negotiations. The protocol in France for business negotiation requires structure and formality. There tends to be more politeness and order during the negotiations with new ideas to show the value will be beneficial for them and, of course, yourself. Number 4, emphasis on formal and professionalism. Make sure you are wearing business attire. Dress accordingly with social class because it will keep help the status and gain acknowledgement from peers. Number 5, and the last tip. Questions are polite. Please ask questions. French people do not communicate quite often, but when they do, it is very straightforward and often very helpful as well. Here is our first references page. Here is the continued references page. Here is our contact information. Listed is both of our emails, mine and Kayla Ward's. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation.